I've been working on the truck for, well, coming up on 10 years now pretty soon. So believe me when I say that in this job, you see some shit. Some seriously weird, seriously fucked up shit. And like the title says, a man's got to vent. I heard you guys like reading people's stories, so here I am. Now, I work in a smaller city. There's only one hospital and only 3 or 4 trucks. It's due to that fact that in this story, I was at the end of a 24-hour shift of non-stop calls. Turns out both God and Mother Nature had decided that I was doomed to have a bad fucking day because it was hot as hell too. We were sitting in the truck just trying to relax for a few minutes when we got another call. We got a grandma that isn't feeling well, the operator informed us. Me and Red, my coworker on the truck, looked at each other with mutual, "You hearing this shit?" faces. Come on, you're not even trying at this point. That's the 3rd sick grandma we've done today. His voice was filled with surprisingly light sarcasm. Red has always been better at keeping his cool than I am. The worse things get, the more calm and cheerful he becomes. It's definitely more comforting than my more serious and tense demeanor. Me and the 911 operator half-heartedly laughed at Red's joke before getting the address and speeding off to the house. As I raced the truck through traffic, I was unknowingly driving straight towards the most tense moment of my life. Maybe not the scariest, but that's a story for another day. When we pulled up to the house, it was a basic-looking middle-class place. We were let in by a 20-something young man with black hair and a metal band hoodie. As we walked in, there were a few faces around the living room, all looking worried. There was the boy who let us in to our left. On the couch sat a middle-aged woman who was nervously knitting. Across from her, by the door to the kitchen, was an older man who leaned to one side. And as we entered, a small girl ran down the hall to a different part of the house. My eyes were focused on the middle of the room where Granny sat in a rocking chair. She was pale, the kind of pale you only see when things are going really bad. "Hello, everyone." Red greeted the room with a smile that was not returned. He turned to me instead. "Tough crowd, huh? Let's get started." He walked to the rocking chair and put his hand under the old woman's scarf to check the pulse. "Oh God!" He gagged and pulled away, clearly trying not to vomit. I moved in quickly and removed the scarf. Turns out that Grandma's not feeling well translates to having her throat cut wide the fuck open. The whole room was stunned. The older man, something along the lines of, "What the fuck? Did someone cut her neck?" Let me tell you, it took every ounce of willpower I had not to yell, "No shit, Sherlock." But I didn't. I knew I needed to regain control of the situation, and looked at Red. "Hey, you okay?" I didn't give him time to answer. "Get to the truck, get us a cop and a coroner." He had to get to the truck because, for some reason, our cheap-ass hospital didn't think personal radios were necessary for us to get the job done. Even though I could list infinite situations where they would be way, way better, but hey, they were able to save like $50, so worth it. He ran out of the room and I was left alone with the family. It was deathly quiet. I draped the scarf over the dead woman's face and turned to that family. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words escaped me when the dad spoke. What? How did this happen? The dad's eyes locked with my own. I had to answer, but I didn't really have an answer to give, so I deflected. The cops are on their way, so we'll just sit tight for now, I announced to the room. It was then that I heard the worst thing someone on edge could hear. Fast footsteps rushing down the hall to my right, but as I turned my head, I only found a 10 to 12-year-old girl. I took a deep sigh to try and unstick my heart from my throat. Then the child spoke. "Daddy's box is open." My eye darted to the older man in the room. I had assumed he was Daddy, which was confirmed when he said, "Was the gun still in there? We're in the Southwest." So the box being a gun safe wasn't the worrying part. It was when she shook her answering no. The room burst into a cacophony of people shouting at each other. I almost joined them. Instead, I was drowned out by a young man in a dumb band shirt yelling, "Everyone shut the hell up!" The room fell deathly quiet, me most of all, because the voice came from behind me. I slowly turned on my heels to face him. He had the gun, and it was pointed right in my face. Have you ever looked down the barrel of a gun? Not metaphorically, but actually looked into the dark tube to see the bullet in the chamber. It's scary to look at, and to know that in any moment, with any movement, your life could be over. Not to mention that it's even scarier when you know that the person holding the gun is a dumb teen with a stupid-ass band shirt. So I held my hands in the air and I spoke. "Hey, let's calm down." He didn't let me continue. "You said the cops are coming?" I guess he was still a few steps behind. There was a pause as I contemplated what to say. I was frozen in fear. I just wanted to escape. Just a way out. It was like if I didn't say anything, nothing could happen. But of course, that's not the way it works. "Hey!" Like the boy's yell brought me out of my own head. Yes, but let's think, okay? If the cops come bursting in here and see you holding me at gunpoint, what are they going to think? I tried to appeal to the logical side of the kid, but I didn't have the chance to see if I had convinced him. The next few seconds were a bit of a blur, so I'll give it from my POV. Then what really happened? I had my hands held at my level with my head. The door burst open. I squeezed my eyes shut. There was a bang, yelling, a body hitting the floor, and grunts of pain. But there was no pain. I'd heard from patients how you don't feel gun wounds at first, only the pain never followed. I was surprised to find myself still standing when the chaos had subsided. It was only then that I opened my eyes. I was told by Red later that the cop had grabbed the kid, scaring him and making his shot only graze me. The teen was put in handcuffs and arrested. I was lucky being left with just a burn on my cheek. My break is almost over, so I have to wrap this up. Both me and Red were called to testify at the court case. The kid was guilty. Not much came from it other than us both getting a day off. There's not really a moral to this story. If I had to say, I guess it's that I'm lucky enough to dodge a bullet, but not lucky enough to not get shot at in the first place. If y'all like this, maybe I'll post again. I got plenty more to rant about. There is a street in my town. Nobody really remembers its name, as they all just call it the Street of Shadows. There are lots of rumors about how it earned its name. Some say the shadow of a person gains sentience and attacks the person. Some say you turn into a shadow if you go there. Some even say it's the path to the shadow realm, whatever that means. The street is pretty normal during the day, sure, people avoid it because of the rumors, but kids my age use that street all the time. They do say that they spot something moving once in a while, but it's pretty harmless. The only time that street is avoided by everyone is at night, as nobody who has ever dared to go there at night has ever been found again. Late introduction, but I'm Elijah, a high school student. For my project this year, I'm researching the Street of Shadows. I have gathered all that information on the street, but something seems to be missing. With no concrete evidence, this project is as good as a conspiracy theory, so I decided to go to the street myself. Now, obviously, I'm not dumb enough to do it alone, so I got my bestie Noah with me. I grabbed my camera and went to meet Noah on the street at 5:30 p.m. When I reached there, he was already waiting for me. "Took you forever," he said to me. "I had to get the camera ready and all," I replied. "Just so you know, I'm only doing this so that you put my name on the project as well. If anything happens, I'm leaving you behind and running," he said in a sarcastic tone. I laughed and then signaled him to follow me. We went inside the street. It was empty. Nobody really wanted to be there any time near the sunset, which was in another 30 minutes. I started recording the place. The street was long. There were mostly houses which looked like they had been abandoned for decades. There were vines growing on the fences. The wild ones that grow in a garden isn't looked after. We went deeper into the street. There wasn't much change in the scenery, except the end of the street was getting closer. At the end of the street, there was just a wall. It used to be a residential street before, so it didn't lead anywhere. I never found out when the street became abandoned in my research, so it must have been long back. Noah suddenly grabbed me and pointed towards one of the houses. His hands were shaking, and he pointed towards a window in one of the houses. "There's something there," he said. His voice was shaking as well. I looked at the window, but I could only see the darkness. The house was abandoned for who knows how long, so it was unlikely that there was anyone there. "I don't see anything there. You probably just imagined it," I said to him. But... "You're right. Sorry about that," he replied. "It's almost sunset. Let's sit down," I said, pointing to a nearby bench. The bench was clean, unlike everything else on the street. It was probably brought by one of the other kids. We sat down and waited for the sun to set. About 40 minutes later at 6:30, it was fully dark. "So now what?" Noah asked me. Well, I didn't really think what to do after it's dark. I hoped that if anything was there, then it'll show itself as soon as it gets dark. "Let's just record this place and leave," I replied. "But what about our project?" he asked. "Well, we'll just say we busted the myth," I replied. We started walking back. I recorded everything on the way. It was all the same except much creepier than before. We were halfway through the street when we suddenly heard something break behind us. We turned around and saw that the bench we were sitting on had been broken in 2 parts. I took a step back, trying to comprehend what was going on. That's when suddenly something emerged from the shadows and started moving towards us. It started getting closer, and I was barely able to make out what it was. It was a woman. She was wearing a black gown. Her hair was long, which reached to her knees, and it covered the upper part of her face. She was getting closer to us. I was able to make out a little more detail. Her unexposed face had no skin, and just flesh. It was covered in blood. Her hands had long nails, which had blood and pieces of flesh stuck in them. I was frozen in fear. I couldn't move as she slowly walked towards us. Noah suddenly grabbed me and yelled, "Run, dumbass!" I finally snapped out of it and started running. The woman started screaming and chased after us. She was getting awfully close. She was so much faster than us. I quickly turned on the flash on my camera and threw it at the woman. It hit her and flashed on her face, blinding her for a few seconds, which gave us enough time to get out of there. We quickly ran to my house and into my room. We were both gasping for air. It's not every day you run for your life. We finally calmed down after a few minutes. Good thinking about throwing the camera. But we no longer have the footage, so it was all for nothing, Noah said with a disappointed tone. Think again, I said, as I held up the memory card I took out before throwing the camera. I transferred the footage from the memory card to my laptop. The second half of the footage was mostly us running, and didn't capture the woman. I think I saw something in one of those houses. Turn up the brightness and look, Noah said to me. I turned up the brightness and looked through the first half of the footage. What was in there left me and Noah even more frightened than before. All the houses had a skeleton hanging by a rope in the darkness, but not just normal skeletons. Skeletons covered in a brown dried blood, almost as if somebody had taken off the flesh from a dead body and the remaining blood dried up on the skeleton. We reached the part where Noah had pointed to the house. There was the woman at the window pointing towards the rope and smiling with her blood-covered mouth at the camera. My name is James, and for 11 years, I've been haunted by something that happened when I was 14. I live in St. Stur, a tiny mountain town with less than 600 people. What happened to me that October changed my life, and to this day, I still don't understand it. On October 4th, 2013, my father, grandfather, and I went elk hunting early in the morning. It was quiet, eerily quiet. You could barely hear the animals moving. We hiked about 4 miles from the trucks when everything went dead silent. My grandpa, trying to ease the tension, joked, "When the woods go quiet, there's a predator around. Guess they know how mean we are." I laughed, but it didn't help. Something about that morning felt off, like we weren't the only ones out there. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. We didn't see anything all day, so we decided to head back. As we got closer to the trucks, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. About 200 feet from the trail, we heard a scream. It was so close, closer than anything should have been without us seeing it. My grandpa told us to move fast. We all piled into the truck, and as we backed up, I caught a glimpse of it. A tall, dark figure, like a twisted mix of a man and a deer, its claws sharp and teeth razor-like. It was smiling. My grandpa saw it too, because he didn't say a word the whole way back. He just focused on getting us out of there. We didn't make it home until 6 p.m. Later that night, I overheard my grandpa and dad talking. My grandpa asked, "Did you see it too?" My dad didn't believe him, said it was all stories he used to tell, but I knew it was real. I told them I saw it, and I could tell by the look in my grandpa's eyes that he believed me. My dad, though, said it was just paranoia after hearing that scream. But it wasn't a mountain lion. My grandpa said it was something else, something older. That night, I went to bed, but I woke up around 5:30 a.m. to the sound of my grandpa trying to stop my dad from going back into the mountains. He was convinced it wasn't over, and deep down, so was I. My dad never came back. They searched the mountains, but they never found a trace of him. Weeks went by. Then the knocking started. Every night, a knock at my window, and every night I heard my dad's voice.
"Let me in,"
He'd say.
"I forgot my keys."
But the voice was always just wrong, like someone trying to imitate him, but not quite getting it right. For years, I lived with that knocking. My grandpa told me never to answer, and I didn't. When my grandpa passed away, the knocking didn't stop. It just changed. Now it's his voice I hear too, both of them calling to me from the woods every night. They get louder. Every night, it gets harder to ignore. I know it's only a matter of time before whatever took them takes me too. I don't know how much longer I can resist. My husband is not someone who takes initiative when it comes to our relationship. I mean, he's known to make timely grand gestures, but he's not someone who books a weekend getaway unprompted, wedding anniversary or not. So I was really surprised when Dan told me that we would be staying at the Claremont Club and Spa Hotel. Even more surprising was the fact that he knew I wanted to stay there at all. I had thrown it out there one day as a filler comment, one of those choppy conversations where we just made sounds at each other and never expected to retain anything said by the other. But he did. We had tried and failed at the whole anniversary thing before. 5 times, actually. Our first anniversary was during the early days of COVID. The next year, we had our son. The following year, our son came down with croup. The week before our 3rd anniversary, I gave birth again. This time to twins. And last year, we were simply too exhausted to even imagine doing anything for ourselves. So needless to say, it's been a challenging task to celebrate our marriage. But this year, it seemed like we were actually going to be able to do it. I made sure contingency plans were in place. I may have even went overboard because I had 2 backup sitters in line should my parents get overwhelmed by our 3 under 3. Dan reached over to offer a comforting hand during our drive into the Berkeley Hills. He could see that I was holding my phone in a way that I was anticipating the dreaded call, asking us to turn around because something went wrong. This is what going 0 for 5 does to someone. I had been stripped of positive expectations. I even started thinking us not being able to celebrate our anniversary was a bad omen for our marriage. It wasn't Dan's initial joke that almost ruined my mood, but the follow-up. As we were pulling up to the hotel, he made a joke about the building looking like the architectural version of a cairn. I didn't get it at first, but he pointed out the hotel's exterior was painted in the widest pier of whites. It sat atop a hill in a wealthy neighborhood looking down on Oakland, and has a very unwelcoming barbed-wired fence running along the property line. I told him it's been a half-decade-long struggle to even be able to have this getaway with him, and that I didn't want stupid jokes. I wanted relaxing and romantic. He told me I sounded like a Karen. He was right, and that was more annoying than the fact I was sounding like a Karen. We entered the lobby, and it still didn't feel like reality to me. I was fully expecting us to leave at any moment, but with each step we took towards our room, I grew more and more comfortable. Which, I might add, was a lot of steps, because he booked us the Tower Suite, a suite that sat lonely at the very end of a repetitive and luminal hallway. By the time we got into the room, climbed up our private set of stairs, and took in the panoramic views framed within the columns, of the outdoor top floor tower. I had completely let my guard down. We were really doing it. Finally, we were celebrating our anniversary. We packed light but carried a lot of baggage into the room with us. Recently, we had been at odds over what seemed like a million little things, but the bigger problem for me was that he felt so distant, and that was never good historically. When you get married, they warn you that marriage will have days that are not so easy. What they don't tell you is that not only are some days not so easy, but they are actively really damn hard. The pressures of life and parenting had been beating us up for a while now, and I mean, even before that, we were high school sweethearts who rollercoastered our way to a wedding in our 30s, so it wasn't always cake and confetti with us. At times, our current relationship felt like we were busy putting out fires at such a rapid pace that we had no bandwidth for each other, me being at home, juggling the feedings, diaper changes, naps, and emotional breakdowns of my 3 babies, while also keeping our house in order and figuring out dinner every night. Him sitting in bumper-to-bumper commutes, working a mind-numbingly boring job, then walking through the front door and jumping right into baths and bedtimes. By the time we are finally able to sit down at the end of the night, I turn off my mind and turn on trash TV, as Dan decompresses into his phone for what feels like literal minutes. Then it's time to get up and go to sleep so we can do it all over again tomorrow. I'll be honest, at this point in life my week was so ridiculously short. I had never been this overworked, this hormonal, this depersonalized, this alone, but this sexually abandoned. Since the birth of our first child 3 years ago, sex has felt like a biannual event. So I was optimistically looking forward to the possibility of making it a bi-nightly event this weekend. We started our stay with an open-ended poolside session. Even though neither of us being big swim people, I enjoyed the sun, and he enjoyed the nearby TV that was playing college football, and his phone chimed in with score notifications. I was deep into my first book in years, and every now and then would come up for air. Every time I did, it seemed like the other guests had cycled out and been replaced by new ones, all except one woman. In the distance, behind Dan's shoulder was a woman, not overtly lingering and honestly minding her own business, but there she constantly was, out of focus and in the background every time I looked over to Dan. Her face was obscured by hair and sunglasses, and even if it wasn't, my eyesight isn't bad enough that I wouldn't be able to see her clearly anyway. What I could make out was her everlasting grin. She never dropped the corners of her mouth. It was annoying, to be honest. How could someone be that happy? I mean, she had every right to be where she was, doing what she was doing. But I just couldn't shake the feeling that she was notable for some ominous reason. She felt off. The sun was setting over the bay, and we were watching from our tower. The cotton candy sky reflecting off the ocean should have been more than enough to hold my attention, but I found myself looking away, looking to where we were just sitting moments ago, to where the familiar woman was. I actually wasn't able to see her due to the trees blocking my vantage point, and I don't even know if she was still there for sure, but I just felt her there somehow. Dan sweetly touched my lower back, inviting me back into the moment with him. Our dinner reservations were pretty late. Luckily, the restaurant was in the hotel, a really swanky joint, cozy mid-century modern decor hid under the lowly lit lights. Yelp said the food was great, but the atmosphere was better, and I couldn't agree more. It was so far away from our everyday life that it was perfect. I don't know about Dan, but for that hour or so, I felt like a previous version of myself. I wasn't carrying the weight of responsibilities, wasn't facing a mountain of future to-dos, wasn't plopping my sad canned spaghetti onto plates. This was nice, and I felt a little guilty about how much I liked it. It didn't take long for Dan and I to be reminded that deep down, under the pile of daily life, we still had a spark. We fell right back into each other with ease. I don't know if it was a result of being romantically pent up or not, but he was as flirtatious as he's ever been with me. It was like a new side to him that I never met, so new that it almost felt alarming. Regardless, I was excited for the first time in a very long time. We were waiting on our entree when I started people watching. I like to imagine who strangers are and what led them to where they were. Sometimes at the end of nights, I'll search the location tag on Instagram and see if I can find anyone I recognize to see how close my assumptions of them were. It's a nosy habit, I know, but in my defense, on a normal day, Dan isn't exactly engaging. He's prone to getting lost in his phone. It's actually annoying, to be honest, and quite enraging when one of his buddies' text earns an actual smirk out of him, and I just have to sit there out of the loop, smirkless. At this point, our food still wasn't at the table, and I've assigned every booth and table their own names, traits, and relationships. I came to the realization that I was out of strangers when I noticed a whole new crop of people. Behind Dan's side of the table was a mirror on the wall, positioned just right so that I could see the bar patrons. I panned down the bar stools, playing a game of tech douche. Then I get to the last person, and she is smiling directly back at me. I instinctually look down in fear of being caught and convince myself that she was probably looking at something else. I give it a few beats to work up courage and then look back up. She is still locked onto me. It is intense, to say the least. My embarrassment doesn't last long because I recognize her. It is the woman from the pool. It's frustratingly dim in the restaurant, and I can't make out her face exactly. But I know it's her. Her empty smile made me feel like her presence was intentional, and although smiles are usually a symbol of friendliness, hers looked like it was only for show. It's at this exact moment that Dan scoots out of his seat to use the restroom. After I watched him walk away into the darkness of the bathroom entrance, I looked back to the mirror to see nothing. She was gone. I can't tell you if I was relieved or scared at this. On the one hand, I didn't have to look at her, which was nice. On the other, she was lurking who knows where, doing who knows what, and that was pretty terrifying for some reason. Her energy did not feel right to me. On our way back to the room, I remembered that we only had one towel left in the room. I told Dan that I would grab some more from the front desk, and that he could go on without me since I wasn't ready to call it a night yet. I was feeling tense, and they had the fireplace going in the lobby, so my immediate plans included a glass of wine in one hand and my book in the other. He half-heartedly offered to stay with me, to which I assured him I was more than fine. I Goldilocks my way into the comfiest chair they had for an hour or so, reading and sipping and reading and sipping, and pretending to read while I eavesdropped on any conversation within earshot, before finally finishing my glass and getting up to go back up to the room. A ringless young lady dutifully listened as a golden-aged ringed man. When that didn't get the reaction he wanted, he pivoted to telling her how the hotel was haunted by a woman, how she lurks around still and no one knows why. I couldn't help but think about the woman I had been seeing all trip. He said she was harmless and was probably just someone who unfortunately passed away on the premises and couldn't move on for whatever reason. I know most people would be spooked by this. I'm not most people. Did I like possibly dealing with a ghost girl? No. But what this phantom lady wasn't going to do was take away the only free night I'd had in years. So I quickly evicted her out of my thoughts, told the bartender to fill up my glass, and stopped at the front desk for water bottles and towels before heading back to Dan. I was approaching a T in the hallway, where going right continues on to the other rooms, and left was where our suite was located. Ours was the only suite on that wing. One of the bottles rolled off of the towels I was holding and fell to the ground. I struggled down to grab it, trying not to drop anything else or spill my precious wine in the process. When I caught a motion in front of me, I looked up through my eyebrows and saw the ends of long hair and sheer fabric suspended in air, wrapping around the corner, trailed by a hand, sliding its fingertips on the wall, all headed towards my room. I heard our door close before I could catch up. I figured it was housekeeping. Maybe Dan forgot that I was going to get towels and call down for them. I walked in and Dan was freshly showered, still donning his towel. That was a bit uncomfortable for me, considering there was a guest in our room. I gave him a look and he asked, "What?" I snapped back. "Are you really walking around naked with a stranger in our room?" He was caught off guard. "What stranger?" I read his face for a moment. Dan has an incredibly dry sense of humor, and I don't always know when he's joking. I realized he wasn't. "The woman," I said. "The one who just came to the room. I saw her in the hallway and heard our door. Did you call housekeeping or something?" He started to get dressed and matter-of-factly said, "No, I didn't." I instantly started to feel uneasy at the thought that someone was intruding on us. We started looking around and couldn't find any trace of anyone other than us. I called down to the front desk and asked if housekeeping had come. After a long hold, they said they hadn't sent anyone up. I even had them check the cameras, to which they confirmed no one entered the room before me. News that I could try to rest my anxiety with. After a nice, warm, and relaxing shower with my wine glass, I got ready for bed. Dan was already in the covers, but moved over to make room for me when he saw me. I got in bed next to him, and he fit his body around mine. I forgot what this felt like. I didn't want to move because it was so perfect. I was getting ready to dust off the sensual side of my brain when I heard it. I waited for a second sound to be sure. Seconds later, my hunch was confirmed. He was snoring. I tried to sleep, I really did, and no matter how hard I rationalized, the feeling of someone being in my space prevented me from closing my eyes for long. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't see housekeeping. It was her. The woman. It had to be. Her existence was sticky. I couldn't get her out of my head, no matter how hard I tried. It's 3 in the morning and I'm in a full-on spiral with each snore. I'm starting to resent my husband more and more for leaving me alone. Why does he get to peacefully sleep in bliss while I'm so distressed? It didn't seem fair. It's never seemed fair. From the nightstand, Dan's phone screen lit up the room for just 1 second, and that's when I noticed it. It was blending into the shadows at first, but I could definitely make out a silhouette in the corner. Her silhouette. She was in my room and looking at me. I think maybe she could see that I was now aware of her because she washed away into the darkness as soon as the phone screen went black. This was it, the straw that broke me. I felt so discombobulated and uneven. I couldn't trust my own emotions. I had no idea that I could produce as many tears as were flooding my face. By now, Dan had woken up. I almost wish he hadn't. I tried to tell him that the woman was back. She was in our room. To my surprise, he responded a little combatively, probably because this was his first night of really good sleep in a long time, and I had prematurely ended it. He told me that there was no woman, that I had already looked. He looked, the front desk looked, and it was all in my head. He asked how many glasses of wine I'd had since dinner, as if wine was a hallucinogen. I started to feel like I didn't have the support of my partner. He was denying seeing the woman at all, even though I knew she was here. I hid my face into my hands in full breakdown. I think that's when Dan truly started to wake up. He didn't fully know what to do or how to react. He rubbed my back and apologized profusely, trying to get me to calm down. That didn't help. I felt alone. I felt scared. I felt crazy. He kept throwing out possibilities of why this was all happening. You're stressed, you're overworked, you're tired. All that did was make it worse. I wanted to scream for him to shut up, and I was going to. I really was. But when I looked up at him, there she was. Arms draped over his shoulders, head tilted, and eyes peeking through at me from behind his neck like a shy animal. I physically flinched at the sight. I couldn't tell at first when only her eyes were visible, but as she slowly veered from behind him, I could see she was wearing the most pervasive smile, as if she was taunting me. I started hyperventilating and instinctually fled the room. I bounced back and forth between hallway walls, trying to find my balance. Dan chased after me. My next memory is being in an emergency room bed. Dan says I wouldn't calm down and eventually passed out. The ambulance picked me up, and here we were waiting on blood work and tests. The doctor said I was having a pretty intense panic attack caused by stress. The daily grind probably caught up to me and I crumbled under it. They say panic attacks are more common than people realize. Mine being severe, I had to get follow-up treatment to prevent any more. After some weeks, I felt pretty back to normal. I had learned a few techniques to help when I was feeling anxious. Dan eventually joined some of these sessions as well, and as sad as it sounds, life moved on. You either have to catch up and move on with it, or you get left behind to struggle. I chose to repair and move on. Through the recovery, Dan picked up the slack to lighten my load. He was extremely remorseful of how alone I felt throughout the ordeal. He made it a point to get better about connecting and checking in with me. He was as great as he could be. I also found comfort in knowing our kids were so young that we were able to hide it all from them. They would grow up having no idea about mommy's breakdown. or the woman that haunted me at the Claremont Hotel. My therapist still asks, and I think I've gotten good at lying, because when he does ask if I still see her, I say no pretty convincingly. The truth is, I do still see her all the time. She lives in my peripheral now, off to the side, out of focus, in the background, at the end of the grocery store aisle, across a crowd at my son's t-ball games, in the reflection of Dan's eyes when he leans in to kiss me. Sometimes I actually forget she's there. I know she is. But I don't give her the power anymore. Eventually, she will just fade away. Or that's my hope, at least. I don't know if I'm crazy or if there's something genuinely wrong with me, but I need to write this down. Maybe putting it into words will help. Maybe it'll prove that I'm not losing my mind. It started about 2 weeks ago, just little things at first. I'd misplace my keys and find them in strange places, like inside the fridge or the bathroom sink. I chalked it up to being tired. Work's been stressful lately, and I've been putting in long hours. But then other things started happening, and I can't ignore it anymore. One morning, I woke up and everything felt off. It's hard to explain, but it was like the world was tilted just slightly. Like everything around me was wrong in some subtle, horrifying way. My room felt different, like it wasn't really my room, even though nothing had changed. I had this overwhelming feeling that something was watching me. I tried to shake it off, but the feeling stayed with me all day. The next few days, things only got worse. I'd hear faint whispers in the middle of the night, just on the edge of hearing, like they were coming from inside the walls. They didn't make any sense, just a low, unintelligible murmur that made my skin crawl. I started sleeping with the lights on, but it didn't help. If anything, it made it worse. Shadows seemed to move just outside my vision, flickering and darting around whenever I wasn't looking directly at them. And then the dreams started. In my dreams, I'd be walking through my house, but it wasn't really my house. It was a twisted version of it, dark and distorted. The walls would stretch out like they were breathing, and the floor would buckle under my feet. I tried to find a way out, but every door led me deeper into the nightmare. There was always this awful feeling of dread, like something terrible was just around the corner, waiting for me. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, heart pounding, but relieved to be back in the real world. At least I used to be. Now I'm not so sure which world is the nightmare. 2 days ago, I noticed something strange in my reflection. It wasn't anything obvious, just a small detail that I almost missed. My reflection smiled at me when I wasn't smiling. It was so subtle that I thought I'd imagined it, but it happened again and again. Now I can't look at mirrors without feeling nauseous. I tried covering them up, but I swear I can still feel my reflection staring at me from behind the fabric, grinning that horrible wrong smile. Yesterday, I found something that pushed me over the edge. I was getting ready for bed when I noticed a small notebook on my nightstand. I don't remember buying it, and it wasn't there before. I flipped through the pages, and they were all filled with writing in my handwriting, but I don't remember writing any of it. The notes were disturbing. They described things I've never done. places I've never been, and conversations I've never had. But the most terrifying part is that they described events that hadn't happened yet, but later that day they did. It was like the notebook was predicting my future, and it was never anything good. For example, one entry said, "You'll cut your hand on a broken glass." I didn't think much of it until I accidentally knocked a glass off the counter and sliced my palm open while cleaning up the pieces. Another entry said, "Your friend Emily will call with bad news." An hour later, Emily called to tell me her cat had died unexpectedly. Now I'm terrified to read the rest of the notebook, but I can't stop. I need to know what's going to happen next, even if it's awful, and it always is. Last night, I had the worst dream yet. I was in that twisted version of my house again, only this time I wasn't alone. There was something else there with me. I didn't see it, but I could feel it, this overwhelming presence, like a weight on my chest. It whispered to me, and I understood it this time. It said, "I'm coming for you." I woke up screaming, and that's when I noticed the notebook on my bed. It wasn't on the nightstand anymore, and there was a new entry that I hadn't written. It's not a dream. I don't know what to do. I'm terrified to go to sleep, but I can't stay awake forever. The whispers are getting louder, and my reflection has stopped mimicking me altogether. It just stares at me with that awful grin, like it knows something I don't. I feel like I'm losing my grip on reality. The world doesn't feel real anymore. Every sound, every shadow, every little thing feels wrong, like it's all part of some sick game that I'm trapped in. I've tried reaching out to friends, but they don't understand. They think I'm just stressed out, that I need a break, but I know that's not it. Something's really wrong, and it feels awful. And now I'm scared that whatever's happening to me isn't going to stop until it's too late. I've started hearing footsteps in my house at night. They're soft, almost imperceptible, but I know they're there. At first, I thought it was just the house settling, but then I heard them stop outside my bedroom door. I held my breath, waiting for whatever it was to come inside, but it never did. When I finally gathered the courage to check, there was no one there, but I could still feel that presence, that awful suffocating weight. Today, I found another entry in the notebook. It wasn't there when I went to bed, but when I woke up, it was waiting for me. It's inside the house. I don't know what to do anymore. I feel like I'm being watched constantly, like there's something just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. I've checked every lock, every window, but nothing seems to keep it out. It's like it's already inside, just biding its time. And now, as I'm writing this, I can hear it again, the footsteps. They're louder this time, more deliberate. They're coming down the hall, getting closer and closer. My heart is pounding, and my hands are shaking so badly that it's hard to type. I don't know if I'll be able to finish this. I don't know if anyone will even read this. The footsteps have stopped outside my door again. I can hear breathing now. Low, raspy breaths, like something is struggling to draw air. I'm too scared to look, too scared to move. I know it's out there waiting for me to open the door. There's another entry in the notebook. It's here. I don't know what it wants, but I can feel it. It's right on the other side of the door. and it's waiting for me. I can't hide forever, I know that, but I'm so scared. I don't want to see what's out there. I don't want to know what's been watching me all this time. I can hear the doorknob turning now. It's slow, deliberate, like it knows I'm too terrified to stop it. The door is creaking open, and I can feel the cold air seeping into the room. I'm sorry, I have to go. I have to. If you're reading this, I am probably gone by now, but I need to warn you. I don't know what's happening, but it's real, it's all real, and it won't stop. Not until it has what it wants. I thought I could hide, but it found me. It always finds you. And it's not just in the nightmares, it's everywhere. I can't fight it anymore, but maybe you can. Maybe if you're reading this, you can find a way to stop it before it's too late. But whatever you do, don't trust your reflection. Don't listen to the whispers. And whatever you do, don't open the door. It's waiting for you too. I moved into my new apartment 10 days ago, after landing a new job that pays enough to warrant this cross-country change. I'm in a new city where I don't know anyone. I'm brand new here and things are already getting weird. I need to know if I'm going crazy. This has to be some distasteful prank, right? I feel like I'm going insane. My new apartment complex can be classified as high-end. I'm definitely not used to living in this kind of privileged environment, but I quite like it. It's a gated community with a security guard in the entrance booth 24 hours a day. Every street, parking area, and sidewalk are always well lit. The community center has a gym and clubhouse with all sorts of amenities. There's a sizable dog park that my Chance, a 2-year-old lab mix, already loves. Even the dog visitors are well behaved. Everything is normal and not threatening, which is why I keep thinking I'm making myself crazy here. I've had a few run-ins with a tenant that are increasing in severity. On my second night here, I took Chance for a walk around the complex. He only feels at home after he sniffs, smells, and pees on everything. So I was giving him the chance to do just that. Everyone I encountered was occupied in their own business. Some had headphones on, others were on the phone. Families chatted on their evening walk, all except an old and wiry lady. I felt her gaze well before our paths crossed. From about 30 meters away, I felt her eyes lock onto me. I met her eye line, was taken back by her disturbing look, and turned back down towards Chance. Her eyes were wide, bloodshot, and unblinking. Under most circumstances, her look would be almost comical. With her eyebrows wrinkled, her forehead with how elevated they were, and her eyes were wide enough you'd think she was trying to keep from falling asleep, except she was walking directly at me. You never notice a person's walking rhythm and cadence until you encounter someone like her. She took steps of all sizes at varying speeds, making her seem intoxicated. As we crossed paths, Chance, being his usual self, approached her, but she never broke eye contact with me. It was as if the 75-pound goofball wasn't slobbering at her feet. She continued walking, staring at me, shaking her head slightly. Her bloodshot eyes were those of a terrified person, begging for blinking lubrication. At our closest proximity, she whispered, "Get out!" in an airy and raspy tone. As if struggling to find air to breathe, I pulled Chance closer to me and walked away, pretending to have not heard her or noticed her peculiar demeanor. That was the first one, but the threats, warnings, whatever you want to call them, only have become worse. On the fifth night, I was in bed, reading with my bedstand light on. Chance slept at my feet. I was deep in my book, but the sudden silence, created by the absence of Chance's snoring, caught my attention. I put the book down and noticed his head was cocked towards my bedroom door. He huffed and puffed suspiciously, as if wanting to alert me with a bark, but being unsure of what was going on. He jumped onto the ground with the clumsy and ungraceful thump of a Labrador and exited my room. Instantly, he was barking wildly. I ran to see what was going on. The possibility of any sort of danger never crossed my mind. This was a very nice complex. I found Chance pawing and scratching, unaware that a note had been slipped under the door. I picked up the folded message, and this time, I got a little more information. "Get out, he is coming for you." This actually made me chuckle. I read about people writing in a mixture of capital and lowercase letters to add a spooky factor to their message in books, but I had never encountered it in real life. I pretended not to notice the fact that there were a few brown streaks that resembled blood throughout the paper. I folded it and placed it in the trash. I returned to bed, still warm and cozy. If it were just these two instances, I would have dismissed them. I definitely do not have that special element that allows people to believe in the supernatural, but what happened tonight has me doubting my intuition. An hour ago, at approximately 2 a.m., Chance repeated the same alerting routine. He plopped out of bed, waking me up, and ran to the front door. I got up very groggy and stumbled out. I half expected another note of the spooky nature, but there was nothing there. Chance scratched at the door, barking aggressively. Without thinking, my brain was still in bed asleep. I opened the door to find the same wiry lady that I encountered on my first night, except this time she looked fully psychotic, distraught, and potentially injured. Her clothes were drenched, as if she had been submerged in water. They highlighted how skinny she truly was, hanging onto her like a scarecrow. She was covered in something thick, maybe mud, that clumped her thin hair. Her eyes were the same, wide, red, and unblinking. She had light cuts around her arms, neck, and face. Her voice, I must have dreamed this, didn't quite register in my brain. It was as if two voices were coming out of one mouth. One voice was extremely high-pitched, almost inaudible, and the other extremely low-pitched, like a rumble, but it still remained raspy and airy, as if she had just sprinted up the stairs and was out of breath. "Get out! He is coming for you," she said. I stood staring at her, my brain barely getting out of bed. My first thought was of the security guard at the entrance. Surely security here is tight. As if reading my mind, she added, "Get out, before it's too late, and they don't let you leave anymore. He is coming for you." Instinctively, I shut the door on her. Chance continued barking for a few minutes. He then determined the threat was gone, and crawled back into bed. I sat next to him in shock. I've been staring blankly at the floor and couldn't do anything else other than write this. I'm crazy for feeling any sort of fear, right? Surely it's just one, assuming the note came from her. Crazy lady freaking me out. I don't know what to think. Before I get into what's happening, present date, I would like to add context. I'm an 18-year-old female. My family is from Guatemala. My grandma claims stories similar that happened to our female relatives, and even ancestors. She claims that we have a tendency to see horrible things. I never believed her until it started happening to me. Growing up, I played with my imaginary friend Eddie. Long story short, Eddie was a boy maybe, slightly older than me at the time, 5 or 6, and my mother tells me all about how I would do things and blame them on him. Later in life, about 2 years ago, my neighbor told me something that still makes my blood run cold. She's an older lady in her late 80s, but she told me about how the man who lived in the house years before we moved in had died. He had taken his own life as his wife had left him. His name was Edison. Unfortunately, not the last something like this would happen. On to what's going on now. My dad is a construction worker and head of his team. He works on old burned down buildings, apartments and houses. About a week ago, I started to have horrible nightmares. Ones of people breaking into the house, or of people killing my pets. I have 3 cats all under a year. I have just got a new job, and have been on this sub, so I thought it was me being stressed, and late night thinking that maybe all the spooky stuff had just translated into my dreams, which could be the case. That was until this past weekend. I went to stay at my boyfriend's place, an 18-year-old male. I had the same issue of nightmares, dreaming of people breaking into his house, and the sense of dread. We are both Christians, so I prayed and tried to sleep it off. I got home yesterday and, for the first time in the past week, slept well. Today, I think, is what scared me. It's my mother's birthday. She took my grandma and aunt out for her birthday with my youngest brother. I have 2, 3-year-old and 13-year-old. They left, and I am home alone. I closed all the doors in the house so I could keep track of which rooms the cats were in. My master bedroom door was locked. My mom keeps it that way to make sure the cats don't get in. I had put my headphones on blasting music and cleaned up the living room. I started to make lunch, and that's when I heard it. The cats were screaming, one hiding under the table, another sitting on the edge of the hallway hissing, and one inside my mother's bedroom. My cat Teddy was inside, screaming at something. I called for him, and after a while he came to me. The other cats came too. I went into the hallway and closed the door, swearing it was locked. As soon as I sat down to eat at the table again, I heard the cats screaming and scratching at the door. Mind you, all of them, especially Theo and Mushy, Teddy a Siamese cat, and Mushrooms a black cat, all cats are male, were historically trying to get into the room. Teddy is a sweet boy, and Mushroom is a shy and sweet cat. He's normally hiding from others, even my family. So to see this spooked me, not as much as the sound. It came from my mom's room, a loud growl. I grabbed the cats and have been praying in my room. Something tells me that my father might have brought something home with him. My chest has been tight, and I've been getting dizzy since he started his new job in an old burned-down apartment complex near an old hospital. I don't know what to do. This is true, and I'm so scared. I'm home alone for the next hour.